O Dota da Balaclava e a jornalista Isadora Almeida entrevistaram o radialista inglês Matt Wilkinson. Ele tem um programa na Apple Music, falou sobre a imprensa musical britânica, relembrou os tempos em que trabalhou na NME, uma das maiores revistas de música do mundo, e também ressaltou a importância de ser um curador e pesquisador musical.
Thanks so much again for joining us. I'm not like a proper interviewer. I'm just like a guy with a label and just a fan of yours. And Isadora is joining us today for the interview.
Hey, hi Isadora.
Hi Matt, finally.
Yeah,
I
nice
can talk
to
to
connect.
you.
Yeah, I've been talking to you for like 3 or 4 years or something.
Yes.
Oh, nice one. It's good to talk to both of you actually.
Great. I'm happy to. Unfortunately, this year is so bad, but I'm happy. Yeah.
It's the same for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah. We're supposed to be meeting you like, I don't know, around like, I don't know, maybe at a Black Midi concert in UK, but well, unfortunately this year was a total mess. How are you doing in the quarantine?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm kind of used to it now. I'm bored of it. I mean, it's the new normal. This is my house. So this is like where I've been doing all the interviews from for the show. And I've been recording in my wardrobe, which I won't bother showing you because it's just a wardrobe. But yeah, we haven't been in the studio for like 6 months now. So it's really weird. But just, I don't know, ticking along. London is it feels like we're on the verge of going back into lockdown again. Like it's really weird with the government at the moment. There are these weekly bulletins where they say, right, Liverpool, that's got to go into lockdown because there's an outbreak there and it's getting worse here and worse here and worse here. And it just feels like it's kind of creeping up on us. But, you know, everybody's getting through it as the only way that they can, really. What's it like with you? Are you in Rio at the moment?
We're in São Paulo, yeah.
São Paulo.
Actually, I'm in the countryside with my parents. It's like an hour by car. So, yeah, but it's super hot. Yeah, super hot.
And also
that's difficult.
The quarantine it's crazy because it's like in Rio, for instance, it's just like no one's actually caring about it. So like the beaches are like really crowded. It's insane. Like it used to be like São Paulo was the worst at the beginning of the quarantine, but now like the whole country is a total mess because it's like the markets, they were closed for a while, but then like now it started to open. But there wasn't like a proper lockdown, you know, like it's like the government doesn't help at all. So like the politics and all the mess. So it's difficult. Like we didn't have this lockdown. So like people got tired of staying at home.
Yeah.
And they need to work. Like some of them really need to work. So like we're the ones able to adapt and stay at home, but it's difficult.
It's similar here. I mean, like, how do you people manage like hundreds of millions of people? How do you stop them from getting annoyed with it? You know, it's really difficult, isn't it? I can kind of understand it in a way, but then I've been being quite good. I haven't been to any gigs. There've kind of been a few gigs happening. Black Midi played the other day.
Yeah, they played the Windmill, right?
Yeah, they played the Windmill, but because it was South London, for me, it means getting it's like an hour away on public transport. And just, I don't really want to be doing public transport unless I absolutely have to. And then the thought of going to gigs at the moment is a bit weird as well. Just not sure I'm ready to get to that level. I mean, I miss it so much. It's just crazy. You must feel the same.
Yeah, totally. Like for us, it was a total damage. Like because we had a whole year planned with like international gigs, all of our bands as well, like touring the country. A lot of records that were postponed to be released. So it's really difficult. And we had like a full year of concerts. So now like the talking with the agents, it's really weird because you cannot actually plan anything like in so much advance. We don't actually know what's going to happen. So
people just plan and then they push it, don't they? Like, so people, I can remember at the start of this, I bumped into a guy who books Shacklewell Arms and Moth Club and all these London venues, all the best London venues, really, a guy called Keith. Bumped into him in April, I'm going to guess. And he was like, well, we're booking stuff for September, but I don't know if it's going to happen. And then, of course, we get to September and that stuff that's been booked then rolls over to like February. And we're just going to get to February and it will roll over again until April. And, you know, no one knows. No one's got a clue. Nobody can safely say this is a thing to aim for.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Shacklewell Arms, because one of our bands, actually from Brazil, Odradek, they were supposed to play at Shacklewell on August because they were invited to perform at the Arctangent Festival in Bristol. So it was postponed to next year, and the whole trip was like refunding the flights and all the craziness involved. So
at the same time, like, I wanted to come to probably both of you guys actually. We've been talking about trying to get down to Brazil for ages now. I mean, there's quite a few, I mean, it's so far away for me that I've got no idea what the music scene is like there. I can talk to people in Shame and whoever who goes and tours out there and say, what's it actually like in Brazil? But really, I don't really know. And I know there's interesting stuff going on with it. I'm quite desperate to get down to that part of the world.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk. We have something prepared.
Yeah. Can we start, Fernando?
Yeah, sure. Like at first, we wanted to know like what you used to listen to when you were like a teenager. What was your like main music and music that you used to listen to with your family? And
when I was about 10 years old, I would have seen Top of the Pops. Do you know that show?
Yeah.
Like, legendary British show. It's not on anymore, but it was like every Wednesday night, 7 p.m, Top of the Pops is on, and it was just a part of everybody's week. Like whether you were 50 or 5, you would watch it. And I remember I'd bought music before that, but I hadn't I just bought anything. I wasn't really zoning in on much. And then when I was about 10, I remember seeing, I think it was Cigarettes and Alcohol by Oasis or Whatever by Oasis. One of those two songs. And it just struck a chord with me. And at the same time, I started getting into Blur as well, but I can't remember why or how. And I was too young really to get Britpop because I wasn't old enough to go to gigs. I didn't really have any money to buy tapes or CDs or anything. So it was all a bit kind of, I was playing catch up on it. But really I got given a compilation tape which had all of those bands on it, like your Blurs, your Oasis, Pulps, Suede, all those big Britpop bands. And then it had loads of old classics as well. Songs like Come On Feel the Noise by Slade, Get It On by T-Rex was on there. Lots of glam songs that kind of fed into Britpop. All the Britpop bands were referencing David Bowie and Mark Bolan and people like that. And this compilation obviously
to cover, right? Like always used to cover Come On Feel the Noise.
They did an amazing cover of that song. It's like, gosh, genius. And I heard this compilation. It was a bit of a musical education for me because I didn't know that Slade were like 50 years old then and Oasis are 20. I was like 9 or 10 years old, you know, they was all the same to me. So that was a big thing. And from there, really, I just became quite obsessed with Oasis, as a lot of the UK did. I mean, we're doing a Britpop program because this week is 25 years since Morning Glory. So I'm full of stats about Oasis and it's just mad. Like here's one that I remember. On week 22 of Morning Glory being out, it was still selling 100,000 copies in the UK every week. 100,000. And it had been out for 6 months. It's mad. So I was swept up in that. And from Oasis, the great thing about Liam and Noel was in every interview, they would say, I love the Beatles and I love the Rolling Stones and I love the Kinks and the Who and the Stone Roses and David Bowie and the Jam. And you had all these reference points for like a 10, 11-year-old kid. Suddenly it was like this musical tree was just growing. And it's like, well, if I like Oasis, I'll like the Beatles. I didn't know, I'd never bothered listening to the Beatles before that.
Yeah.
And I just got obsessed with all those classic Oasis inspirations, really. And then when you start branching out from those inspirations, and if you look at the Jam's influences, you've got everything from reggae to soul to northern soul to straight up punk. I mean, you start getting really interesting things, and before you know it, you're onto like Can and Kraftwerk and the more kind of out there stuff, and then eventually you get to like Aphex Twin or whoever. But for me, it was Oasis really, and I would say Nirvana later on, and Radiohead was the three key bands in the 90s for me. And then from them, I just dove headfirst into everything, really.
That's really cool. It's kind of similar to us. Like, me and Isadora were huge Oasis fans as well. Like, and like my first record, I even mentioned, like, I guess in the interview with Fantano, like, Be Here Now was my first proper like record that I bought. So like,
did you like it? Were you like completely won over by it, or did you listen to it and you think, oh, it's a bit long, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit long, but like at the same time, I was 11 when I saw like the video for was the first song. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it was really iconic to me. So it kind of like blew my mind when I saw the helicopter and all the things.
How ridiculous is that video? Can we just stop like that? They've got like 10 helicopters in that video, and they don't do anything. The band don't
by the pool.
Anything. Like they're literally just stood there in coats, playing guitars and looking moody, and then it's like Apocalypse Now in the background. It's mad.
Were you into the rivalry in the Britpop, like the madness?
Yeah. Weirdly, what did I do? I bought. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm telling you this, and B, I don't know why I did it. But I was about 9 or 10, and I bought Park Life on tape by Blur. Never played it, and I bought it to break it. I stood on it and smashed it with my feet in solidarity with Oasis. That's how Team Oasis I was. And then like you cut forward like 2 years later or something, and you think, well, actually that album's a classic. Blur are amazing, every bit as good as Oasis. And you're like, why did I smash that tape? So at the time I was definitely camp Oasis. Don't know why.
That's crazy.
I guess that
it's okay.
I think there's something, I see it a lot on Instagram actually, because I'm of that age group and my algorithm has a lot of 90s stuff that it throws at me. There seem to be a lot of people around my age, like, who are obsessed with Liam and Noel. And I think that would have started when they were like 10 or 11. And you're at a really impressionable age at that point. And I just think there's something about the way that those two guys conducted themselves in the press, the things that they said, their messaging was so clear and simple. Even a 10-year-old kid can understand it. I was probably put off by Damon Albarn as a 10-year-old kid because I thought he's too intellectual. He's talking about like reading books that I have no idea about, whereas Oasis are talking about clothes and, you know, things that are just on the cusp of what I'm getting into in adulthood. I think there's something quite interesting in that. Really.
And also I saw that you have an acoustic guitar with you, and like to me, I'm a musician as well. Like to me, when I was a kid, like playing the Oasis songs was possible, but like Blur songs,
so
like,
easy,
impossible to play Graham Coxon's. Like so, that was also another fact. Like gathering all the friends and playing Oasis was a big thing. So like it was accessible. So yeah, I
mean, it's kind of cliche. You know, that thing of like, oh, he's got an acoustic guitar and he's going to play it at a party. It's like not the coolest thing you could ever do now. But I can remember going to parties when I was like 14, 15, and the songs that inevitably, when it got to like 2 a.m. and everyone was drunk, songs that people would play were like Plug-in Baby by Muse, lots of Nirvana, lots of Oasis. It was these big, brash, like major chords. They're all major chords. There's not many minor chords really. You know, they're very kind of, they might not be positive songs, but they just sound quite anthemic.
Yeah. So Matt, as you said, Top of the Pops, it was big here for us too, but actually with the pay TV, we could afford. It was a big thing for us. And also MTV Brazil was an essential channel for us as a creative and innovative place for new formats. And the presenters here, they were so honest and revolutionaries. But they were like role models that our generation here owes them a lot. And I know that MTV Gonzo with Zane Lowe was important in the UK, especially for the indie rock scene. Did you used to watch a lot of MTV, and how influenced were you by that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, MTV and VH1 were the only music channels that you got. And I'm going to say most people in the UK didn't have satellite TV. So they didn't have access to those channels. Yeah. So the things you missed out on as a kid were you could never see The Simpsons. You could never watch football, because that was always shown on there. And you couldn't watch music videos. And in the 90s, it slowly got cheaper and more people got satellite. And I think by the time we got to the end of the 90s, my gran had satellite TV, and it just blew my mind. I spent my life watching VH1, which is slightly older demographic, obviously, and MTV. MTV started MTV2 at that point in the UK. And MTV2 was just, it was wicked. It was so, so good. I remember watching it at probably like quite early in the morning, like staying up late and watching it like midnight or 1 a.m. And the programming was so weird. Like my introduction to Lee Scratch Perry was like a 10-minute video that MTV2 showed. And it was just like, what is this? I thought reggae was like Bob Marley singing Three Little Birds or Redemption Song. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this is, wow. Yeah. This is just so mind-blowing. And there were loads of things like that. You know, that was the first time that you actually got to see bands in person, because I didn't go to many gigs when I was growing up. I lived in the countryside. There weren't any gigs. So the only chance I had to do that was through TV channels. And then when you flip it forward a few years and you get Gonzo with Zayn, which was kind of revolutionary in a way, even though, you know, the clue is in the title, Gonzo. It's Gonzo journalism has been around for 40 years by that point or something. But the way that Zayn conducted those interviews, and just the way, how relaxed it was between the bands and him, it was like they were in a pub or a coffee house and you were just earwigging on the conversation. And I'd never really seen that before. You kind of got a little bit of that in the music press in places like NME and Q. In their interviews, they had that vibe. But on radio, it's quite, couldn't really hear. Maybe Lamac had that vibe about him a little bit on the evening session on Radio 1, but it certainly wasn't. It was quite surprising when Zayn started doing Gonzo and like, wow, really making it just. They didn't even have a background. You know, they had a couch that was knackered, and then they had a fake background, and that was it. It was just so low budget. It was brilliant.
Yeah. Here in Brazil is exactly the same thing. Like we had. Not Zayn, but we had amazing TV presenters that we still love them because they were so revolutionary. Like Fernando also grew up watching MTV, and we spend the nights watching like Massive Attack and whoa, oh my God, what is this?
It's insane, isn't it? I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like I remember when Yola Tango came to Brazil the first time, and they played like on a live MTV Brazil show. Like it was called Lado B-side, and it was insane to see them playing. They were performing Os Mutantes live, and they're playing Baby, and it was incredible to see that happening. And I was a total kid, so I couldn't properly understand what was going on, but it kind of amazed me in a way. So. Yeah, it was crazy. And when you started like getting into music, were you into record labels as well? Did you start following record labels?
Yeah, that would have come a little bit later. That would have probably come around the time of the Strokes and the White Stripes, because the bands before that, like Radiohead, were on Parlophone, I think. Nirvana were on Geffen, but I missed Nirvana. Like, I can't remember Cobain dying. I was too young. And then Oasis were on Creation/Sony, and the label didn't seem that involved, really. It was just more about them. But by the time you flip forward to Strokes, White Stripes, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Interpol, Libertines, those bands, the labels seem to take on more prominence then. Like, there's a real, I think it's the fact that Rough Trade was resurrected because it had closed for a few years. It went bankrupt, and then I think in 2000, just before they found the Strokes, like months before they found the Strokes, someone at Beggars had the idea of, hey, let's resurrect Rough Trade, this legendary label, let's bring it back. And then the first thing they signed was the Strokes. Imagine that. Imagine if you're Jeff Travis and Jeanette Lee, and you've just got this, you got your baby up and running again, and you stumble on that band. You'd just be like, thank you. So around that point, like Rough Trade just became, and XL in particular, they became quite iconic for me at that point, really. And I was getting older as well, and I was realizing the importance of a label and what each person's role was at a label and things like that. So yeah, it all fed into it.
So you're like, from like, considering nowadays, like the whole generation of like playlists and whatever, so like how you see as a label, the importance of a record label, like being a filter for the people's choices and for the audience, like, I'm going to follow this label because I trust them and that kind of thing, like, because it's so much like you're getting affected by a lot of multiple things today, and like on Fridays the several album releases. So like, how you see that?
I think it's more to do with the people who you associate yourself with as an artist. Putting myself in an artist's shoes here, it's more about the people you associate yourself with rather than the traditional roles, because you could be Dua Lipa, right? If Dua Lipa signed to Rough Trade, it wouldn't work because they don't have that infrastructure for her. If she signs to, I can't remember who she's on, like Columbia or Atlantic, she's on a major, isn't she? She needs that push in order to become the huge pop star that she is. She needs that team of people who are geared towards that world. And it's the same. I think record companies will never die because you'll always have that need and desire to surround yourself with people in those roles. You'll always want a manager. You'll always want a plugger. You'll always want an A&R. A&Rs are so important. I mean, talk to Black Midi about having Paul and Bertie and Callum, their managers / A&Rs, kind of helping out on that record. You know, I'm not saying they drive it, but they're an integral part of the creation of those records. And that's always going to exist. I think maybe some labels could do a better job of kind of being up to speed on how digital works. It's slightly frustrating sometimes when you come across labels who kind of still scratching their head about, oh, how do we get this on digital service provider like Apple? How do we, it's like, wow, we've been doing this for like, this world has existed for about 10 years now. Like, you've got to be on it. There's no excuses really. But I think, labels will always exist. And I love labels as well. I mean, you look back at what are the greatest labels ever: Motown, Atlantic, right up to the indies, to your XLs and your Rough Trades. There are amazing stories behind those labels. Just read Richard Russell's book, and it just reignited everything that he's done and that XL did, and why that label's so important.
Matt, and how did you become a journalist at the NME? And tell us about the years there.
So I did journalism at uni, and I came out of journalism having no idea what to do, really. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I moved back to Cornwall, where I'm from, and I kind of just sat around for a year and didn't do much. And after like 6 months, my mum sort of forced me to get a job. So I had a friend of my uncle, this girl called Helen, who was just setting up a magazine, which was called Stranger. And I said, well, I've got a journalism degree. Maybe I can go to her and just sit in her office and kind of get work experience. And this was in Cornwall. So I was living at home for free. You could get rent in Cornwall for like £50 a week at that point. It was so cheap to live there. So it wasn't like a major expense for me to not get paid for a job. And anyway, I go to this magazine, Stranger. I end up kind of getting a taste for how it all works, seeing it in the flesh, seeing how a magazine is run and put together was really useful. And then I started interviewing people, and I interviewed loads of pretty insignificant people, like the bass player from the 2220s. That was one of my first interviews. I can't remember his name. Sorry if he's watching. But you know, it was always like the bass player or the drummer. It was never even the singer. And then one day we get this email saying, would you like to go and interview Amy Winehouse? And at that point, Back to Black's been released. It's won Grammys and Brits. It's huge. She's like the biggest and best musician on the planet. Like, she is as big as it gets. So it's like, yes. And Helen, God bless her, this magazine, she said, Matt, do you want to go and do the interview? She didn't have to do, but she did. So I went to do that interview and met Amy, had my 15-20 minutes with her, and it was amazing. It was a really good connection. It was no different to the interviews that I do now. It was exactly the same feeling and line of questioning. It wasn't like I kind of, you know, it seemed very natural. So I did that interview, I wrote it up, and 2 months later I saw NME had a job going. So I emailed them. I emailed a guy called Paul Stokes, who was a news editor at that point. And I just said, hey, look, I've interviewed Amy Winehouse recently. This is my stuff. Please take a look. And the Winehouse thing, you know, she's huge at that point. That obviously helped me. So that's how I got into NME. And I spent about 5 years at NME, kind of worked my way up. Initially, I was just the guy who would do absolutely everything. And I said yes to everything. And I did thousands and thousands of interviews. Like, literally, as someone pointed out to me the other day, NME have indexed all their articles now online. There's like 1,000 pages of articles that I've written, just these rubbish news stories and stuff that they're not proper writing. It's regurgitating news, basically. So it's not like creative writing in any way, but I did a lot for NME. And eventually it led to doing big cover features on Arctic Monkeys and people like that, and Libertines and Oasis. McCartney I did as well, which was amazing. And aside from that, I kind of loved my like big artists, the heritage artists, but I was living in London by this point. I was just obsessed with new music. So I kind of became the radar editor, which is new bands, and just dove headfirst into that world, really. And that led on to what I'm doing now.
It's really cool. And still talking about like kind of like NME and the British press in general terms, like we always feel like the British press is trying to find like the next big thing, or like the next Arctic Monkeys, the next Oasis. Like, do you think has changed nowadays in a way, like, or?
Maybe. Press is different now because online, you can't get the same kind of humor that you could get in print. Mm. It's just impossible to translate. It doesn't fly off the page in the same way. And I don't know why that is.
You mean also like the irony behind it, like, or
the
sarcasm?
The irony behind it, sarcasm, the kind of seriousness and geekiness as well. Like NME, you have to remember, NME would write like his 15 pages on an album by Woo Life, who were like a band who no one knew. And NME would kind of get, you know, in a tears about this band and be like, yes, let's do it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I know everyone says that British press build bands up and break them down, but actually they build bands up because they get obsessed with them. And then they get slightly disappointed when those bands on album 2, 3, and 4 can't maintain the momentum. I think that's what it is, really. But yeah, it's like, it kind of exists in a way. It's kind of still there, I guess. But it is different now.
And it's crazy, like how also like it's still about the British press. Like there's the Britpop, new rave, post-Brexit punk, like all those things that usually the bands are against those terms. but in a way helps them to promote their music or the genre. Like, does it still make sense for the music industry to brand these bands in a way?
I don't know. I mean, all that stuff came about via marketing. Well, all that stuff comes from advertising. The only reason genres exist is so that advertisers can box things in a certain way. And the reason they did that in the past was because that's what record shops wanted. Record shops wanted a jazz section, a soul section, an easy listening section, and a rock section. That's why genres exist. So there is really no reason why genres need to exist now. They don't really need to, because you've got it all on this. You don't need to like find the rock section in an app. It's just there. But saying that, part of me likes genres. Part of me likes the fact that you can put a bunch of bands together. You know, there's always that thing like 1 or 2 bands isn't enough, but 3, you've got a scene. And then when you have a scene, it kind of makes it bigger collectively. Yeah. And you never really hear of, I'm pretty sure that you never really hear of people in hip hop or dance sneering at genres as much as they do in rock. It only seems to be in rock where people can't accept that they're Britpop or punk. Everybody, like everyone in rock, from Johnny Rotten saying we're not punk to Damon saying we're not Britpop. You know, no one's willing to accept it. It's quite funny.
And at the same time, I think it's cool when like a band like Black Midi, they invite like hip hop artists to support them instead of like noise rock bands. So you don't see like the same concert twice. So similar things like it's
I like
really
that
cool
as well.
when it has that mixture. Yeah,
I've always taken like bands who pick the support bands really seriously. I've always liked like. I always get there early for gigs. I always see the support band because you never know, that might be the best gig you ever see. Support bands are usually trying really hard because they want to be noticed, and they're playing against a crowd that isn't their own, so they're up against it. So the pressure is on the support band. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Matt, talk about your radio show. I'm curious to know the transition from print to radio. How was it? Did you feel comfortable? And I really want to know how much rehearsal was involved before going live, because you are so natural.
I had no idea what I was doing.
Come on.
Honestly, I had no idea. I'd never done radio other than I was a guest on Six Music a couple of times while I was at NME and Radio X. And NME had a radio station that they wouldn't let journalists go on because they were too worried about how bad we would be, probably. So we saw this radio station through glass windows and we were like, oh, that looks interesting. But by the time I started the show, so I'd met Zayn along the way, right? Through working at NME and just through going to gigs and stuff like that. I'd met Zayn a few times and I got on with him, but we never really hung out. We were just kind of music industry contacts. And I looked at him as if saying, well, what he does on Radio 1, his show on Radio 1 at that point was about 7 p.m. in the evening. It was all new music focused. And I said, there's a direct correlation between him, what he's doing on Radio 1 and what I'm doing at NME. So I used to send him songs. I used to email him tracks that I found, stumbled on and liked. And I thought, I can imagine Zayn playing that. So I remember sending him Shamir. Do you know that guy?
Yeah.
Sent him really early Shamir songs and he played it straight away. And I remember him shouting me out and he was just like, Matt Wilkinson, NME, thanks for sending me this tip, man. And I heard it and I was like, wow, he's just mentioned me on the radio. And anyway, we became slightly closer. And then he left Radio 1. To go to Apple. And he said when he was leaving Radio 1, he said, I've got this gig at Apple. I can't tell you what it is yet, but I'm leaving to go to Apple. So everyone knew that Apple were doing something. And then he went silent for like 3 or 4 months. And in those 3 or 4 months, I get an email and it says, hey, fancy a coffee? And he's never done that before. And I was like, that's a bit weird. Yeah. And we kept pushing this meeting. It never happened for like months and months and months, I guess, because he was so busy. Kept getting changed at the last minute and like, oh shit, I can't make it, sorry. And then eventually we have this meeting and I walk in and I'm like, wow, maybe this is a job interview. It just dawned on me as I was walking into the cafe. I was like, maybe he's like, he wants me to be involved in this new Apple thing. And he kind of did, he said there and then, he was like, I kind of want you to do something for us. I don't know what yet. I know you've never done radio, but I think you could be good at it. And I had no idea that he even wanted me to front a show until like a month later. I thought he just wanted me to work on his show behind the scenes or something. Like he's got a team like Deegan, who's on his show at the moment. I kind of thought he wanted me to be the UK version of that. And then I get this call being like, we want you to front your own show. And I'm like, wow. And he's like, what do you think? Do you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, without thinking about it at all. Put the phone down and then was like, I better start like really listening to radio and working out like what people actually do. Cause I've got no idea. I've never been in a radio studio before. And then we maybe had like 2 months prep where I would meet producers and I literally use voice notes on my phone. I would wake up in the morning and overnight someone from LA, Beats One, as it was then called, Beats One LA, would have sent me an email saying, okay, Matt, can you record us 5 links? Record us a link saying you're going from a new Tom York song into a new Billie Eilish song or whatever. And just record a link with no music. Just say it into voice notes. And I did that for like 2 or 3 weeks. And it was obviously their way of like seeing, what's he actually like on a mic? Could he do it? And I had no idea what I was doing. I was winging it completely. And then when I met producers in person, we did the same kind of thing. I got a little bit more tutorial there of like how you should, just speak in even basic things like how should you speak into a mic? Like, do you do it there? Do you do it there? Like, where's it need to go? And then the first time I went into the studio was the day I was on air. So we launched on, I think it was July the 1st, 2015. And my first show was something like the 2nd or the 3rd. It was a couple of days in. And they're like, right, we're going to put you on air. Come into the studio. And I did. And I got a taxi up there and I was like, this is insane. I was like, heartbeat. And I walk into the studio and it's amazing. I mean, it's like the studio that we used at that point was where Sweet Dreams by Eurythmics was written and recorded. It was where, like, I think Dave did his album there. Adele did her records there. Like, it's an amazing studio. It's called The Church. We're not there anymore, but we were there for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And I walk into this place and I'm like, wow, this is pretty big. And then before I know it, like, half an hour later, I'm on air. And you have this countdown before you go on air. You have someone come in your headphones saying, all right, Matt, you've got a minute left, you've got 30 seconds left, you've got 10, 9, 8, 7. And it's like NASA taking off or something like that. Like you're feeling insane. And I just remember my last thought before I went on air was something like, I hope I get this right. I really hope I get this right. And it goes all right. And it did. And the first link that I did was just fine, nervous, obviously, but you kind of just get through it. And from there on in, it's just been like diving in head first at every step of the way, really.
Yeah, I love radio. Actually, I'm graduated in social communication with the ability in radio and TV. I used to work at MTV Brazil. And really, you are one of the best radio hosts, really, because you're so natural. Really, really. I listen to Triple J, BBC 6, 1, 4, and you are amazing, man. Thank you for really, really, really.
Thank you for saying that. I love that. That reminds me of something that Zane said really early on, which I've only just remembered, where I can't remember what we were talking about, but he said something, he was really serious. Zane is like he's full of ideas and full of energy. And when he kind of zones in on you, you take notice. And he said something like, I don't want you to be like everyone else. I don't want you to learn by the book. Yeah. Because then you'll sound like everyone else. I want you to be natural. You've already got the knowledge up there from all your NME stuff. Just convert that to radio. And it was good him saying that, because it was like, cool, I can kind of do whatever I want. There's no rules. I can take this wherever I want.
Yeah.
And at the same time, did you take John Peel or Steve Lamacq as references? Like, do you used to listen to them a lot and study in a way like the way they used to? to do it?
Yeah, yeah, loved it. I absolutely loved it. As soon as you get to that age of about 13 or 14 and you get bored of whatever's being shown on the TV, you're not old enough to go out, you naturally turn to radio at that point. And Lamac and Joe Wiley, when they were doing the evening session, were just iconic, really.
Yes.
Really, like, amazing interviews that those guys did, and context about records. And then after them, they would finish at 10, and then it would be John Peel's show, which is like 10 till 1 or something like that. And all right, for a 14, 15-year-old kid, the music he played was extremely out there, and a good 70% of it I would be listening to. Not that I listened to the whole thing, but when I, you know, the chances are when I tuned in, it would be like, I have no idea what this type of music is even called, let alone who the artist is. So it's very educational. But then every now and then Peel would introduce you to the White Stripes, and it would just, or a band who would totally make sense. So Peel, yeah, he was always the granddaddy or the godfather or the king, really. I think Peel's the best. I think Peel is what we all aspire to be, really.
And you have that intention on your radio to be like to bring stuff from the underground as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that comes from Peel. That comes from Peel, and also Zayn as well, actually. No, I do remember listening to Zayn on Radio 1, and he would go from the maddest stuff. He'd be playing something really mainstream, and then he'd play like a horrors B-side or something. And that really excited me, that fact that, wow, there's no rules for that guy. Yeah. And that's really the great thing, not just about my show, but about all of the shows on Apple Music One. There's no playlist rules. I read something the other day, right? This is mad. Where's the book? Oh, it's in my room, but I'm reading, there's a book called My Magpie Eyes Are Hungry for the Prize. And it's about the history of UK independent music, about Creation and Rough Trade and Wichita and Mute and all those labels. And there's a bit in it that says, when, I need to get this right. When Oasis released Do You Know What I Mean? It was playlisted, but it struggled to get on playlists at Radio 1 in the 90s because the playlist kind of rules were so strict that there wasn't space for guitar music at that point. And that just completely shocked me. It was like, wow, they had rules like that saying you're only allowed to play like 3 non-playlist guitar bands every 3 hours or something. That's ridiculous. And you've got to remember, like, I don't come from a radio background. Apple is the only radio that I've ever known. So to go and be given a show where there's literally just like, it's a blank page in front of me every single day. We literally play whatever we want and we can go anywhere with it. I didn't realize how lucky I was to have that, first of all, but now I do because of what I've learned, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I'm reading the Margrave of the Marches, the autobiography of John Peel, and I'm the chapter that he said he was the first one to play reggae in 1968, and he's talking about what
was the song? Can you remember? Was it Double Barrel or something like that by Dave and Ansel Collins? I think it might be.
Yeah, it might be. But it's so strange to think that, like, I don't know, 40 years ago, it was like, no, you can't play a song on the radio because people won't listen. This, who said, like, and this is the brilliant thing in the Apple Music One. And yeah, but I really want to know about the challenges in creating a show that goes on air worldwide. Like, how do you do that?
The challenges there are too many songs to fit into the 2-hour slot that we're allocated. Yeah. Like, even though I do 5 shows a week, so that's 10 hours of radio. It's like there's more music than we can fit in. But that's it all goes hand in hand. Like, things that we can't fit in, I can always put in a playlist on the app and still give it some love. Things that are, say you get like a 20-minute song that realistically, Bob Dylan is a great example of that. That Dylan tune that Murder Most Foul that came out earlier this year. I think it's like 27 minutes long. You know, that's the equivalent of playing 7 Dylan songs in a row, just one play of that thing. But you can put it on a playlist. You can push it to other places on the app. So, you know, there are kind of infinite possibilities really when it comes to that stuff. But in terms of creating a show, my philosophy is all good music all of the time. It's quite basic. Music is king. It's something which drives me and it drives the show. And I think it's really just to do with whatever mood I'm in that day. Like the other day, we played a load of mad Japanese funk from the 70s, which I don't know that much about, but I just heard it and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm definitely going to play this. Wonder what else I can find. And then you go into a rabbit hole and you end up on playlists and you listen to other cool stuff. And then before you know it, you've got like 20 minutes of tunes like it. So it's things like that. There's always the constant thing of new music, like the breaking section that we do on the show. We've spoken about, do we need breaking every day? Do we want to have it every day? Do we want to have it as 5 songs together every day? You know, just getting technical with you here. And we all agreed, me and my 4 producers, we all agreed that, like, yeah, breaking is one of the things that we do best. And we love doing it. We love introducing people to new artists. We love meeting new artists as well and bringing them into our world. So that's probably the mainstay of the show, I would say, is that there's always this drive to present new music in an honest way, good new music in an honest way.
Yeah. And talking about new bands, I was thinking that here in Brazil, it is still very important for a new band to be on a soap opera soundtrack. Like, Really? Yeah. Like the XX and Beirut were years ago were international bands that became bigger because they were featured in some soap opera soundtracks. And
so that's the secret to cracking South America, which is the most coveted place in the world that all British, Australian and American bands want to crack, because you've got the best weather down there, the fans are the best down there, it's just nice, it's not raining all the time. So the key to it is getting on a soap opera soundtrack. Wow.
Yeah, man. And
people don't know that in the UK. The amount of conversations I've had with managers about, like, imagine if we cracked South America.
That's why I'm telling you. Yeah.
One reason the soap opera.
Wow.
Yeah, Matt, now you know.
7-Eleven by Black Midi on, like, I don't know, a breakup scene in a soap opera or something. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Okay. And I was watching Succession, and there is that scene with Kendall driving with the drug out valley, and they're listening to Laura Connor. And outside the UK, I don't think he's a mainstream name. He's still a very new artist. And I was watching I May Destroy You, and there is Arlo Parks and Easy Life in the soundtrack, also 2 new names. And I was thinking that those series are big hits in the whole world because it's easier to watch more series in big streaming platforms, and people get to know those new names in music. I have friends listening to those bands because of the series. So as you work on a big platform, thinking especially for original content, do you think in the near future we'll have more new names in soundtracks to help them reach new markets?
Yeah, I do actually, because I think, it's a bit like, do you know Scott Venner, Broke Mogul? So he did stuff for Apple Music and Beats One when it launched. Actually, he presented the show with Pharrell as well, and so his job was, before it ended anyway, he did all the music for Ballers and Entourage. I think I might be wrong there, but he's the first person in that industry who I've ever met and chatted to on quite an in-depth level. First person in, like, TV sync, film sync world, soundtrack world. And he's just the same as me. He is just a new music and an old music obsessive. And meeting him, before I met him, how songs ended up on adverts and on TV shows was like the dark arts to me. It was like, wow, I don't know how they picked that stuff. Yeah. When I met him, I was like, he's like an A&R guy or a radio guy or a print guy who's obsessed with music. He's just constantly on his phone looking for unearthed, unheard of new music. So when I meet people like him, that whole world, I think, is so exciting because, as you know, from like those examples you just gave, like Succession, that's a key. You can have key moments in film that really elevate the film because of the music. Yeah. Like Donnie Darko, the great example in that for me is Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen.
Yeah.
When they play that song, and then in the script, the words that the characters are saying relate to the words in the song almost. I don't know if it was even intentional or not, but it elevates the whole thing. The song takes on a new meaning. The film gets even better. So yeah, I think it's a bit of an art form, that sort of thing, actually. I think it is important.
Cool. Matt, I want to ask you about it's still about the creatorship and diversity. Like we see so many artists like Matty Healy engaged in political and diversity stuff. Like the lineups have been changing 50-50. And we see a lot of like Shane is also into posting politics. Do you think first, it's important for an artist to speak out about those matters? And do you think about this kind of diversity when you curate playlists? Like, is it a conscious thing or it just comes naturally?
I think about it, yeah, but it's an afterthought. Like I'll program the playlist and then, you want to tick boxes in a way. You want to make sure that you are not skewed to one particular sound too much. You want it to sound diverse. So naturally, I kind of look back and just out of my own curiosity, I kind of, when we really started playlisting things, as in making our show playlists, like when we started the show and we were having to do 20 a month or whatever it was, or however many, no, it would be 30 in a month, wouldn't it? It's 30 days in a month. When every day was making a playlist, I was kind of just interested in how is our breakdown between different types of music, different genders that we're playing, old and new. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised, actually. It was pretty much what it should have been, in my opinion, which is quite evenly spread. So I do think you should consider that stuff. Why not? There's so much music out there. You don't just want to be focusing on one thing. And in terms of the political aspect, if bands feel comfortable doing that, 1000%. If they don't feel comfortable, I don't think it matters, really. I don't think you should say, no one should be forced into saying something that they don't want to say.
Totally.
No one needs to do that, no one's you look at Shame, they're brilliant at articulating themselves and what they think about politically on social media. They're really, really good at that. Same way, Ebro's really good at that as well, actually. As you look at his Twitter and it's I get as much about American politics from his Twitter feed as I do from the news. And Shame is a similar thing where it's you kind of rely, they're a trusted voice and they become a trusted voice because they're comfortable with that sort of thing. You're never going to get to that level unless you're happy doing it in the first place. Yeah,
I feel the same. And about about your show, what's the authority you have? Do you have a decision on all the songs? What's your team like? How many people in the show? And
so the team's pretty small. So we have 4 producers. We have Anna, Katie, Chloe, and Finn. And their roles are kind of they're not interchangeable, but depending on who is busiest editing an interview, depends on who will take the lead of the show. So they can kind of swap roles a little bit. And it's, we're a team. We are a team. We all come from different parts of the musical world. So we all bring something slightly different, which is really handy because, if we get something from dance world, I know that Anna is obsessed with dance. So if I want an opinion, I really like this song. Is this going off in dance? Anna's the person I go to. So it's really handy in the same way that, a team at a publication would be as well. You know, you kind of have your correspondent for different types of sounds, I guess. And it is ultimately, it's my decision what we do, but I'm a team player and I like team playing. I think, me personally, I'm not one of those people who is that happy to take the lead and just go, this is my idea, we're going to do it this way. I always think, I've thought of an idea, what do you guys think of it? It should always be collaborative, you know?
Yeah. And Matt, to finish, we really want to know if, do you know Brazilian music, and do you know any Brazilian artist? Can be a classic one or...
Yeah, the band that I know the most are Bulgarians, because maybe you introduced me to them. I don't know. We've definitely spoken about them.
Yeah,
but I've heard of them. I mean,
yeah.
they reached out actually, or their management reached out probably back in like 2014, 2015. And just even from like looking at a picture of them, I was like, cool, they look pretty interesting. I know that when they eventually come to the UK, I'm going to have to go and check them out and see them. I think, and they are just interesting as well. They just put that kind of compilation B-sides live version thing out as well. I was listening to that the other day. And I'm always interested in what they're doing. And I think, there's actually quite a lot of correlation from the sounds of it between what you guys are doing in Brazil with Balaclava and what is happening here in places like Brixton. I was actually talking to Eddie from Shame about it the other day. Eddie says hi, by the way. And he was just,
I love this guy.
I was talking about, he told me that you went to see the Happy Mondays. It was one of the worst gigs of his life.
That was terrible, man. It was like such a bummer because like we were so into it. Like it was a huge thing for us, both first time. Like we saw Gene Gallagher at the line being a total douche. But then we entered the venue. We were there like the perfect spot on hand. But then like unfortunately the concert was horrible, man. It was such a shame. It was bad. But then we went to a Halloween party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sean and Bez are allowed to play the odd bad gig because they're legends. And they are legendary.
Totally. It was like a total check in my life. But
you saw the Happy Mondays in England. But Eddie was saying, I was talking to him about Balaclava and he was just saying it's basically you're an in-house kind of label, promotions, gigs, publicizing, showing what's happening in Brazil. And I think it's really good. There's that Coup de Man magazine in New Zealand as well. Do you know that?
No.
Yeah.
So they do a similar thing.
Oh yeah, we read Coup de Man. Yeah.
So they do I think of them as a similar thing to you in a way, where it's just like it's people who are. It's like I was saying before about bands will always want to work with good people. If you have a good base of a music scene, then it's just so exciting. You can do so much with that. And so I think I don't know that much about Brazilian music. I know Bulgarians, I know bits and bobs of what are on your label, but the fact that you even exist means that something interesting is going on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And of course, if you don't mind, me and Isadora would love to send you some Brazilian stuff.
Yeah, I'd love it. I think one of Goat Girl, I'm going to misremember who it is, might be Naima, who has possibly left Goat Girl now. She had Brazilian heritage and she made me an amazing Brazilian playlist about 2 years ago with like loads of mad old stuff that I've never heard before.
I remember you played Baden Powell on the show.
Yeah. We did. We played a bunch of that. So yeah. I like that kind of stuff. I like the new stuff as well. Just send me everything.
Yeah.
And it's funny how frequent people are still mentioning Brazilian stuff, because I see that Leon La Havas is mentioning Milton Nascimento, and Claro is mentioning João Gilberto, and Ed O'Brien at your show, he did the top 5 and started with a Brazilian record. So
he lived in Brazil, didn't he, for a while? I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the tracks at Shangri-La is Brazil, and he lived at Santa Teresa neighborhood in Rio. It's crazy, but yeah. So yeah,
I love that. He took his whole family there as well, didn't he? He just upped sticks and was like, "We're going to Brazil for a year." I love that. What
it's
a
your
legend.
time. Your time.
Yeah.
Is the
That's your time.
I'm gonna call Zane. Zane, I've had an idea.
Balaclava is hiring me.
Yeah.
No, but it has to happen though. I mean, we have to meet up in person at some point, either in London or Brazil.
Definitely.
You know?
Definitely.
Man, thanks so much for your time. We loved it, and we'll keep in touch.
Pleasure, guys. So nice catching up with you. Look after yourselves.
Yeah.
You too.
You too, man. Thank
Keep in touch. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Everyone.
Bye.